So Salento and Filandia are two of the most popular towns in Colombia's coffee axis, but which one should you visit? Hi all, I'm Ezerado and you're watching my travel channel where I talk all things Colombia. As said, today I'm taking a look at Salento and Filandia, which are popular tourist destinations in the department of Quindio. They're both known and loved for their brightly coloured buildings with classic Spanish architecture surrounded by beautiful green meadows and hills. People will also often stay in these towns if they want to visit the famous Cocora Valley, a World Heritage Site home to the world's tallest palm trees, and a hiking trail with some amazing views. From Salento and Filandia, the valley's only a short jeep ride or two away. Getting back to these towns though, both share a lot in common, so a lot of people will just pick one of them to visit during their time in Quindio, and if this is something that you're planning to do, you may be wondering which one you should choose. Well, I myself happen to have stayed a couple of nights in both towns, so I thought I'd talk a bit about the pros and cons of each to help you decide based on your preferences. Let's start with Salento, which is by far the more popular destination of the two, although that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. If you visit both, you'll notice very quickly that there are a lot more tourists here, particularly international tourists. If you're already set on coming to Salento but you don't like being around tourists, I'd suggest visiting during the week instead of the weekend, as it tends to be quieter. Truthfully though, you're probably going to see a handful of tourists wherever you visit here, as the reality is it's a very popular tourist destination. I'm not sure exactly why, but for whatever reason, Filandia seems to have gotten a lot less publicity than Salento in the tourism space, even though they're very similar to each other. They're both a similar size, they both have similar colourful architecture, they're both surrounded by picturesque hills and meadows, so why Salento gets all the attention and less so Filandia, I'm really not sure. With all that said, Salento definitely earns its popularity in its beauty. Although there's not a lot to differentiate it aesthetically from Filandia, that's far from a criticism. Salento has most of the attributes you'd want from a classic Colombian village. Although it's not the country's most colourful destination, that'd probably be Guatapé, it's still up there thanks to its beautiful whitewashed buildings featuring colourful highlights, particularly on the doors and balconies. Apparently this was one of the towns that inspired Disney for the village in Encanto, and you can definitely see it. Really the only thing missing are these traditional cobblestone streets. If that's what you're looking for, I suggest visiting Barichara in Santander, which is another of the country's prettiest towns. In Salento though, the roads and footpaths are mostly just concrete, so nothing too exciting there unfortunately. Perhaps the prettiest part of Salento is its main plaza. This is generally the busiest part of the town, as it's essentially a square full of souvenir stores and restaurants, along with the town's church, all surrounding a garden with huge palm trees. You also notice a bunch of jeeps here which can take you to nearby tourist destinations, including the aforementioned Cocora Valley, which brings me to my next point, the town's proximity to the site. This would have to be the main advantage Salento has over Filandia. Both are close to the valley, but from Salento you'll only need to take one of these jeeps to get there, whereas from Filandia you'll need to take two, one to get from Filandia to Salento and one to get from Salento to the valley. It's possible that they might change this up sometimes and have a jeep that goes directly to the valley from Filandia, but speaking from my experience at least, I was told that there was no direct transport and therefore had to take two jeeps from Filandia. To get a rough idea, it's about half an hour from Filandia to Salento, and then another 20 minutes from Salento to the valley. In terms of the jeep schedules, I can't quite remember how often they leave, but there should be several leaving within each hour throughout the day in both towns. To make the return trip, I also had to get a jeep back to Salento before hopping on another, from there back to Filandia. So yeah, all of that's to say that it's definitely easier to visit the valley if you're staying in Salento. Moving on to Filandia though, as mentioned earlier, it's definitely the less touristy town of the two, at least in terms of the amount of foreign visitors you see. In fact, looking back on it, I don't remember seeing a single foreigner, although I was there mostly during the week as I arrived Sunday afternoon and left on Tuesday. Speaking of which, I really gotta stress that there is a night and day difference between weekends and weekdays here. On that Sunday afternoon I arrived, the town was packed with crowds, so I was walking around a lot of people to get to my accommodation. For the next 2 days though, I almost felt like I was the only tourist around, so I definitely recommend coming during the week. As far as the town itself goes though, once again it's very similar to Salento in many ways. For instance, although you don't see as many foreign tourists, it's honestly just as geared for tourists in the amount of souvenir shops and other visitor attractions. I also didn't notice much difference between the town in terms of the amount of accommodation options on Airbnb. Neither have heaps as they're both fairly small, but there's enough in both to fit a variety of budgets. Outside of having less foreign tourists, another benefit I'd say Filandia has over Salento are the amount of lookout points across the town. Salento has a few, but at least from what I recall, Filandia seems to have several more dispersed throughout the town. Most notably, there's also a lookout tower just over a kilometre out of the village that you can walk to. Here you'll find a short walking track around some gardens, and a few other sites set up for tourist photo ops. Then from the tower itself, which consists of multiple stories, you'll get amazing views on the hills that stretch out to the horizon on one side and mountains on the other, along with a view of the town. I definitely recommend coming at sunset for the best view, as the sun drops behind the hills and casts golden highlights. If you want to take photos, a multiple exposure merge from this album will honestly give you that Windows XP wallpaper a run for its money. Getting back to Finlandia itself though, another common attribute it shares with Salento is a town plaza, which again consists of a garden in the middle surrounded by an outer square of souvenir stores, cafes and a church, which is very much the town's focal point. Like Salento, this plaza is probably the prettiest part of town and also the busiest. As I alluded to earlier, Finlandia also has jeeps that'll take you to nearby points of interest like Salento. You'll likely see them all around the place, but where exactly you pay for them and board them can vary depending on which transport company you choose, so it's best to just ask locals where to go for this if it's something you're keen on. Same goes for the jeeps in Salento. Anyway, now that I've talked a bit about both of these towns, the big question of course is, which is better? Well, as I often say when comparing things, I really think it comes down to your personal preferences. If you're there for a very short stay but would like to squeeze in a visit to the Cocora Valley, Salento might be a good pick. It's a very iconic town for Colombia and you'll be able to reach the Cocora Valley much quicker. If you have a little more time on your hands though, or you simply don't want to be around as many tourists, Finlandia may be a better option. Being a little quieter, you can really soak in the atmosphere and tranquility a bit more, and take your time to check out the many lookout points, including the tower on the village outskirts. Just remember that getting to Cocora will take a bit longer, so if you want to go, but you're on a tight schedule, Salento may be a better option. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about these towns, but before I close, I thought it'd be worth pointing out that both villages also have bus terminals. The buses that stop here can take you to and from Pereira, along with Armenia, two nearby cities. I might do a more detailed guide on how exactly to get to Salento and Finlandia some other time, but for now I'm going to end this one here. Thanks for watching all this way, and as always, I hope you learned something new. If you have any suggestions for a future video topic about Colombia, let me know in the comments below. Until next time though, like, subscribe, bell, and I'll see you soon. Ciao!